So we are recording, and I will over to you, Vincent, if you want to share your screen and introduce yourself.
Yeah, not a problem. Well, I think my video is going to drop off in a minute, so this is the last you'll see of my face for a bit. So, I mean, that's probably a benefit. Let's have a look. Right, starting a broadcast apparently. Right. Can everybody see this? I can't see anything other than it, so I'm hoping you can.
Yeah, that's all good, Vincent. Yeah, you're all good to go.
Fantastic. Right, well, I will take you through where we're at with this. So what I'm doing here today is I'm hoping to provide you with the tools to make yourself a little bit more sustainable in this year coming forwards. It's things that might be straightforward and obvious, and it's other things that you might not have thought about, but I'm hoping that even if it helps a tiny bit, it should be able to be something that would save you money and carbon impact. So we'll just start straight away. So that's my face. You've seen it before. You saw it just a minute ago. But what you might not know is the logo in the bottom left there is Certified Carbon Literate. So I did a course early last year with the, what are they called? Cumbria Action for Sustainability, so CAFS. And I am now registered as Certified Carbon Literate, which means that I have taken a course which informs me of the modern climate science and where we're at with the climate emergency. I'm not going to say change, because we've already changed our climate. So it means that I've got a little bit of knowledge, and I feel like I would be the right person to inform you on these things, rather than indiscriminate blog users around the world telling you that climate change doesn't exist, because I'm afraid it may have already happened. So first and foremost, everything you do has a chain of impact. There's no way of escaping that. Just breathing, the calories that you use to run your body have a chain of impact. The vegetables that were grown for you to eat, to then exist, absolutely everything you do day to day has a chain of impact. And this is unavoidable. But what you can do is you can choose how much impact you create. And that's the most important part of this. So some things you do are far more polluting than others. So on the left there, we've got Snoopy taking a flight with Woodstock and Woodstock's mates. I don't know which one is Woodstock specifically in that photo. But on your average commercial airliner, per person per hour, you are making 90 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. So we say CO2 equivalent because it's not always carbon dioxide, but because carbon dioxide is our most common pollutant in the air, we use everything as an equivalent to that. So you have things like nitrous oxide and hydrofluoxetines and things like that, which are much more polluting. So we use carbon dioxide as the base level, and we use them as an equivalent to that. And then on the right here, we have Snoopy. I couldn't find Snoopy writing an email because emails didn't exist in the early 50s. So here's Snoopy on a typewriter, but every email that you send is 0.3 grams of carbon dioxide equivalent. So you can see that perhaps you could send 6 emails in an hour, or you could take a flight from, I don't know, here to London, and the pollution that you would create obviously is massively different. And taking flights is one of the biggest pollutants we can do. So I suspect nobody in this meeting takes flights regularly for their business, but it's worth keeping in mind whether you need to use that method of transportation to get where you're going. So I just wanted to forward any of this. It might sound a little bit doom and gloom at time, but it doesn't mean that you should just give up and move to a cabin in the woods, unless you really want to, which, you know, sometimes I've been tempted to do. It's better to be imperfect in trying than just one perfect person doing everything perfectly right. It's not about being the most amazing eco person and showing it off. It's more about having the acumen to try it and do it. So here's a few things you can do. Reduce. So this is the best way to lower any carbon footprint, and it'll probably save you money too. You've got to think that it's always better to avoid creating the impact than trying to find a solution to fix it. So we'll pick up on it a little bit further down the line, but I do carbon offsetting, which is what I pay. I pay about £20 a month to offset my carbon, twice the carbon I create monthly. And that's just a bonus. It's better that I just didn't create that carbon, because once you've created that pollution, once you've created that impact, it's so much harder to bring it back out of the atmosphere. It's so much harder to take it back out of things. Mostly impossible. So it's always better to reduce. And here's me, all these little illustrations of me. Here's me having a tiny piece of cheese rather than the massive piece of cheese. The next one is reuse. So obviously, the more you reuse things, the inherent value of installed impact from that is reduced. So this bloke is having an ice skate, and he's got a massive scarf on because he bought a massive scarf and it's keeping him nice and warm. But like I've said here, every time you use something more than once, its impact and its pollution halves recursively each time. So I've got a few jumpers in my wardrobe I've had for 8 years. They're just about as good as, carbon neutral as a jumper can get nowadays. But the same goes for vehicles. So, it's very popular nowadays that people get company vehicles and personal vehicles. They get a new car every 3 years. Well, even if that car is electric or hybrid, if you stayed with the same car for 10 years, even if it was a massive petrol guzzler, it would actually create less impact than getting a new hybrid or electric car every 3 years, because the inherent cost of pollution in creating that car is greater than operating one that already exists. And last of all is responsible. Now, I know you've heard this I don't know, I'm not going to call it a rhyming couplet, but you've heard reduce, reuse, recycle. But recycling isn't the savior that we've been told it is. It's better to actually look at what we're doing, because the reason why recycling is so popular, the reason why it's promoted by huge companies and it's put on labels, is because it allows us to still consume. If you still buy products, you can recycle the cardboard, you can recycle the plastic. But the fact of the matter is that less than 10% of our recycling in this country actually gets recycled. We used to send our recycling to places like China and Taiwan, and now that their economies have grown, they don't accept it from us anymore. So we've got a volume of recycling that we all diligently put in bags and bins that has nowhere to be recycled in this country, so it ends up in landfill. So it's actually better to be responsible with what you're buying rather than just buying things that can be recycled. So, perhaps you could not get a new t-shirt this month and wait 2 months and get a slightly better quality one that's going to last you 2 months longer, because it's more responsible that you have something that lasts a bit longer. Now, I realize this is a bit of a privilege coming through, and it's not always easy to wait to buy things. Sometimes you need them as you need them. But even with children's toys, I'm a parent of just over a 1-year-old, and we've got some plastic toys and we've got some wooden toys. And the wooden toys feel better because you feel like you're changing the world. You've got wooden toys for a kid. What a great parent you are. But actually, as long as we make sure that the plastic toys go on to somebody else that's going to love them after us, the actual impact is no different. If we put both of them in the bin, they're both creating carbon and being wasted. So it's not about recycling. It's about being responsible, because recycling has been sold to us as this way to keep consuming things. Make sure you recycle your plastic bottles, but don't question why we're making plastic bottles. So that's my little thing at the moment, trying to tell people that recycling isn't the big game changer that we think it all might be. So here's a few things for you to watch out for after we said things that you can do. Watch out for greenwashing. So Innocence movies, I'm sure you've all seen them on shelves. These are the biggest buggers for greenwashing, and it's obvious when you know, but it's not obvious what they're doing. So if you look at their logo, they're called Innocent. Their logo is very naive. It feels very friendly. They've even got a sticker on that bottle there that says 100% recyclable bottle and cap. That's fantastic if it's recyclable. About 90% of our environment is recyclable, but it doesn't mean it needs to be created. It's not recycled. And even if it had been, to recycle something, you still have a huge carbon output to do that. So watch out for companies presenting themselves as being better for the environment than they actually are. And don't buy those Innocence movies. It's Coca-Cola. That's the company that runs them. Carbon offsetting. So carbon offsetting, I've picked up on this a little bit earlier. As I said before, it's better to not create the pollution. It's better to find a way to make less pollution rather than offset. And I think the problem that we're seeing at the moment is, as carbon offsetting becomes a more in-trend thing, what's happening is people are using it to just wash away their guilt. They're like, yeah, I take 6 flights a year and I go to these various places for business, but I pay £20,000 a year to offset the carbon. When the question really is would you not be better off not taking those flights and not spending the £20,000 trying to take the pollution out of the atmosphere? Rather, don't run your very, very gas guzzling supercar. Not that I expect anybody in this meeting has one, but rather find a better way to get to work, maybe walk there. It's it's very convenient that there are companies out there who'll take your money to wash away your guilt. And although they are doing good things, although they're helping plant trees and things like that, it would be better if you just found ways to avoid creating the carbon that you feel guilty about, rather than finding a solution to feel less guilty. And another one is marketing saviors. So on our right here, you can see a boba tea cup. Now these are still completely plastic. You've got plastic cups and a plastic straw. And you may remember recently we got all these paper straws coming through, and paper straws, fantastic. We're not going to be lobbing loads of straws in the ocean. But you get that paper straw and you stick it right into a plastic bottle, or through a plastic lid into a paper bottle which has got a plastic coating. So just be aware that sometimes the things that are promoted to us as saviors are little more than marketing. You know, electric cars aren't going to completely revolutionize our world, not yet anyway, because we don't have the grid to support them, and we're mining minerals and, you know, half of the earth to produce these things, to make them new every single year when they've got a half-life of only 10 years. So in 10 years time, these brand new Teslas and fancy cars are going to be rotting away somewhere because we can't maintain that battery. So it's one of those where it's worth thinking about, is this actually good for the environment, or am I being sold that it's better for the environment? And it's like the other two, it's not that easy to know, but it's always worth keeping your wits about you with whether you're being marketed to or whether it's a factual thing. So here's a few ideas for you, because I know I've sort of just ranted at you for the last three. So first and foremost, volunteering your time. Anything locally that's trying to make an impact on your environment will help you. You know, if you volunteer locally to maintain a garden or to provide some support with planting trees, in 10 years' time, when those trees have grown and they're taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, that's going to directly help you, and it's going to help the planet. So it's worth keeping those in mind. You could join a professional body like 1% for the Planet. I joined them in 2021, and because my tax return didn't come through at the time, I'm not part of 1% for the Planet this year, but I'm going to re-up next year. And that's an initiative run by Yvonne Chenard, who runs Patagonia. Now, he's a bit of a tricksy bloke. You may have seen him in the papers recently for giving his business to the world, or whatever it was. That's not exactly as it seems, and I'm not going to go into it here, but the 1% for the Planet charity is actually a fantastic business, and they do a lot to help the environment. So I would definitely recommend supporting them if you can. The whole scheme is that you give 1% of your profits to the planet. Be mindful of the impact you make. The three biggest polluters that we have as people in public is travel, clothing, and energy. So be mindful of how you're using energy, how you're using your clothing, and how you're traveling, really. And then you can switch providers if you say that journey is necessary, or it's necessary to have your lights on at 2 a.m. for whatever reason. Think about who's providing that energy to you. Banking is a big one. My whole family, all of our bank accounts are right with Barclays, just because that's who we've always used. But Barclays invest massively into the fossil fuels. So we're looking at a way to move away from them at the moment, which is something I had no idea about. You know, the money that I store in that bank account every month is being invested into Shell, and it's not really something that I want them to do. So I'm looking for other banks that don't do that, essentially. That's the same with investments and vehicles. You know, I run a 2015 Dacia Sandero. It's the ultimate dadmobile, but it creates very little pollution. It's already been created, and I don't need anything different, so I keep it, I use it. I don't need a new vehicle. You know, it's perfectly fine as it is. So this one is I was trying to be a little bit funny here. Walk, cycle, or swim to work. Obviously, there is a very small collection of the world that would swim to work, but if you can, that'd be fantastic. But I think the motto for this should be burn calories and not fuels. I think if you're burning calories in your body to get somewhere, there's a lot less impact being created, and it's actually healthier for you. So, you know, double win there. This is a really big one. Don't try to be perfect. Aim to be active and informed. You know, don't try to make sure that everything you do, oh no, some of the plastic didn't go in the recycling last night, I'm a terrible person, did it. It doesn't matter. You'd be better off being aware and informed, because you can make more decisions when you're informed than just trying to be perfect on 2 or 3 actions. And then last of all, educate yourself and your team. You know, if you have a team of people that work for you, or whether you work with a team, it's always helpful to make them aware of the things they're doing, because then they can reduce their footprint too, and it's recursive. If one person knows to stop doing something, the next person can find out as well. Practical, not perfect. That's what I would say. And then some further reading for you. Now, there's infinite books out there on the environment. There's infinite ones telling you how you can be better at it, how you can be better at not creating pollution. But these are the 3 books that I really like, and they're not too on the nose, I think. So first of all is Mike Berners-Lee. So he's based out of Lancaster, which is my hometown. So, shout out to that. But this is a book of his called How Bad Are Bananas? And this is a scientific step-by-step analyzing of how bad various different things are for the environment. So it tells you exactly in CO2 equivalent how much pollution your average banana will create before you get to eat it. So it's really, really interesting to look through this. It's not like an epic read, you're not going to get a massive narrative from this. It's just like a reference book. But if you're ever interested to see how much pollution a single iPhone creates, or perhaps a newspaper, it's all been worked out mathematically with an average error of, like 2 or 3%. So it's really, really interesting to learn about how these things that we take for granted in a modern society and seem pretty okay, like a newspaper, it's paper with ink on it. You wouldn't think it's that polluting, but actually the paper they use is full of acid, so it takes forever to break down. So yeah, if you're interested on the minutiae of it all, that's what I definitely recommend. Next is Yvon Chouinard, as I mentioned before, but this is his business book about running Patagonia, which is called Let My People Go Surfing. And this book is the reason why I'm in business. And it's nothing to do with the environment. It's more about caring for people. It's more about letting people do the things that they want to do. The whole idea of his business was that if you wanted to go surfing, because their offices were in California, you could nip out and go surfing. And as long as the work was done, you were fine. You were golden. And I think that idea allows people to have a greater connection with the environment around them and therefore care for it. I don't know if my connection with that is a little tenuous, but I certainly think that if you are a passionate surfer, mountain biker, hiker, and you can just jump out your job at 2 p.m. to go catch a nice sunset, I'd suspect you'd care a lot more about saving that than the person that's stuck in a fluorescent lit office 9 to 5 every single day. And then last of all, and I was going to have to include this for the namesake at least, is Walden by Henry David Thoreau. Now, this is a very famous book for Americans. I know that in high schools they give it to them to read, and it's certainly a bit wordy because it's from the 1800s, but it's about a man that decides he's done with modern life and he wants to go live on the banks of Walden Pond. He builds a little hut and lives in this rural sort of on scraping the bowl kind of life. And I read it purely because I share my surname with it. And I wasn't massively taken back the first time I read it, but second time through, it just opened my eyes to the idea that this community and this existence that we live in, where everyone has to have a car and everyone has to have this and that, isn't important for you to enjoy your life. There's 101 ways to exist. And it's just a nice book, really. It makes you feel very reminiscent for times before internet and iPhones and things like that. So I'd certainly recommend it if you were just looking for a nice narrative book.